Hi, I'm Ryan Suydam, Chief Experience Officer and co-founder of Client Savvy. We're thrilled to have you here and even more excited to continue the journey of turning CXps from an annual event into a true membership community. Over these next 3 days, we will begin a new journey as we learn, share, and co-create knowledge together. We know you are not here just for the content we've lined up. In fact, the most common feedback we've heard over the years is that it's our community that makes CXps so special. Thank you for being part of it. We've poured our hearts into creating new and innovative ways to connect us with each other and give you a place to meet new friends, build close and trusting relationships with a core group of peers, and have opportunities to discover the tools, services, and gurus that can help you on your CX journey. Over the next 3 days, you will work in small groups of peers to answer the question, what's next on my CX journey? In answering this question, you will complete a workbook to craft your very own CX charter. This charter is a tool you can use to motivate your organization forward on your CX journey. Each of the next 3 days, we'll tackle a different approach to driving change. We've broken this up into 3 parts: winning heads, winning hearts, and aligning with strategy. In part 1, I'll be walking you through an exercise to quantify the business value of your next CX project. We'll get to the dollars and cents business case. Tomorrow, the great Andrea Mack will lead us through an exercise to find and tell the stories that capture our staff and emotionally engage them in change. Closing out day 3, our longtime collaborator, Chandra Storiston, will lead us through an exercise that connects CX to our top strategic priorities. In doing this, CX isn't one more thing, but rather it's an enabler of what matters most to our firms. I hope you're excited to do this work together. Each day includes only 30 minutes of presentation, so we can give you a full hour of time to collaborate with peers and work on your CX plan. Speaking of, you should have your CX workbook already in your inbox. And if you can't find it, we'll put a link in the Zoom chat right now so you can download it. Before we get started, I have a few announcements to make. First, a huge thank you to all of our sponsors. We appreciate you being part of our success. And in particular, I want to acknowledge the great people at Uninet for their continued platinum support and their ongoing engagement with our community. We really appreciate having you here. I also want to let all of you know we had really hoped to make the CXps conference an in-person event this year. And while that wasn't possible for 2021, we are bringing you opportunities to connect in person all year long. For that, CXps will be hosting 6 regional half-day meetups across the country. Each regional meeting will include networking, industry updates on CX trends, a peer panel or case study presentation over lunch, and roundtable workshops to work through CX challenges with other CXps members. Please check out the schedule on the CXps website and register now for your preferred event. Seating is very limited, so we can ensure we host safe, socially distanced events. We are hosting each one of these meetings at a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and we have worked with their event staff to assure both a safe and delightful experience for everybody. We are also re-engineering our CX cohort program. I'll share more details on that tomorrow. And we have a new CX certification course. Stay tuned Thursday for details on that. Now, I'd like to jump into our day 1 agenda. Winning heads, the business case for CX. So, jumping in, creating the case for change, how anyone can lead up and drive value capture in their firms with their CX management program. How much is CX worth to your firm? Are you drawing a blank? Have you actually sat down to quantify the business case? Here's what CX is really doing for us. Here's how it's driving revenue, driving profit, driving growth, saving us money, reducing operational waste. What is client experience doing in your firm? If you're here in the CXps community, it's probably because you believe in CX and you're doing this because you just know it's the right thing to do. And that's really where my heart is as well. It just makes intuitive sense to focus on value creation with our clients and giving them the best experience we can give them. But not everyone in our firm is there. Not everyone has made that same intuitive leap that we've made. There's a lot of pragmatists, there's a lot of skeptics, and they need to see it drawn out and spelled out very specifically. Here's the business case. So that's what we're going to do today. So what does it really mean to see return on investment? And my experience working in professional services my entire career is very few professional services firms are actually effective at tracking, driving, measuring, and reporting on return on investment. So we really have a couple of new things that we're doing here. One, we're doing client experience, and a lot of us are really in the early phases of that. But two, we're going to try to apply some business discipline here that maybe isn't something we're comfortable doing or had a lot of experience doing. So we're going to jump in on that today. Now, when we start thinking about building a business case, you really want to think about what the business opportunities are. There's a famous architect who once said, all you got to do in this industry is the work. And yet surrounding the work, there's a lot of business challenges and business opportunities. And I'm not going to go into deep detail with these, but one of the things you'll do today is pick one or two challenges or one or two opportunities in your business to focus on. And they generally fall into this taxonomy. There's challenges and opportunities: finding work, winning the work, staffing the work, doing and delivering the work, getting paid for the work, and keeping the work, really focusing in on loyalty. So if you're struggling to think about what is CX going to do for my firm, how do I find some way to quantify? Look at this map of potential opportunities or problem spaces and ask yourself, where do we have the biggest problems or challenges? Where do we think we have the biggest opportunities? And let's start thinking there. And in the workbook, you'll see a list with several example challenges and opportunities. Just as a brainstorm, you can certainly pick your own if you think there's something else that's more relevant in your specific situation. So how do we go about calculating the ROI? Step one is identifying the problem or the opportunity. Step two is going through the ROI calculation. And I'm going to introduce you to an ROI model here. And there's no one size fits all. It's going to be different for each problem, challenge, or opportunity. But the mindset is the same. So this is the general approach. And I'm going to come back to this 3 times today as I share some stories and show you how this works. So first, we need to think about what is quantifiable. So when we talk about quantifying, we want to think about the frequency of something happening. We want to think about the magnitude of something happening. Frequency, you can have multiple frequencies. This happens 4 times every day, or this happens 7 times every quarter. So you think about frequency of events. And then you want to think about the magnitude of event. Every time this thing happens, here's the opportunity cost. Here's the impact to revenue. Here's the impact to cost or operational inefficiency. So when you start thinking about quantity, you're thinking really about the frequency of something happening and the magnitude of something happening. And a lot of firms here are really good at measuring. And so you might even have some measurements on these things. And if you don't have measurements, I'm going to encourage you, aim low with your assumptions. If you have to make an assumption, if you have to take a guess or a ballpark estimate, pick a number that no one's going to argue with other than to say is, hey, you've aimed too low. Because the number at the end of this usually comes out being a pretty large and compelling number. And if someone says, I don't buy that number, if we can walk them through the math and all of the assumptions like, yeah, it's at least that much. Of course, it's at least that much. By the time you multiply it out and you get back to the big number, people are going to say, yeah, you're right. This really is a large opportunity, or this is a huge problem. Let's go address it. Multiplication is going to be your friend here. You're going to multiply, you're going to multiply, you're going to multiply again. That's why we look at frequency, why we look at magnitude, and we start multiplying these events in order to create a reasonable, large, compelling number that is also justifiable. I'm going to encourage you, where possible, count profit, not revenue. Not all revenue is valuable. We've all brought in revenue before that wasn't good revenue, cost us more to deliver than maybe it was worth. So we don't want to just focus on revenue. Revenue numbers end up being bigger. But again, if we're going to multiply and we're going to multiply and we're going to multiply, we're going to scale these numbers large. Well, then we're going to whittle them back down in some places, and whittling down to profit or client lifetime value is another way we can do that as well. We want to focus on driving urgency so that we can track change in our organization and get change happening today, not next year and the next budget cycle. We want to make things better for our clients, for our firms immediately. So let's look at what's the impact weekly or monthly or quarterly. We also want to think about driving sustainability in this. What's the lifetime impact? I know it's so easy to look at our firms and just kind of pick a year and say, hey, here's what's going to happen in a year. But we really want to think about the lifetime impact. If we save a client from churning, we don't just count the revenue or the profit we keep for that year. We really want to look ahead to the lifetime of profit. What's the lifetime value of that profit? Because that helps us drive sustainability. So I'm going to walk us through two examples today, two very different examples of some fairly straightforward CX efforts. And we're going to use all of these skills and tools. And I'm going to walk you through how that happened. So in the first example, I'm going to talk about a 200-person civil engineering firm where the receptionist said, hey, we've got a breakdown in our client experience. Too often, people are calling. They want to get to their project manager, and I can't get the person they need to talk to, and I'm sending them to the voicemail. And I just don't think that's a good client experience. And she's right. And, she had actually brought this up several times, but it was tough to get change. And it wasn't until this firm went through a quantification exercise to see just how big the impact was to their business that it really motivated them to do something different here. So let's look at the numbers. What this receptionist reported was between their 4 offices, there were 70 calls a day that were coming in where we couldn't connect the caller, we couldn't connect the client with the project manager, and they were going to voicemail. What happens every time a client calls and they go to voicemail instead of getting a hold of their project manager? Well, as this group was talking about it, well, boy, maybe they're calling to offer us work. And since we don't answer the phone, they call somebody else. Or maybe they're calling to talk about work, but since they keep getting voicemails, they think we're too busy. And so maybe they're not calling to offer us work, but they don't include us on the next project because they think we're too busy or we're overwhelmed. So as we started going through this, the CEO of the company said, yeah, you know what? I think at least 10% of those calls going to voicemail are leading to us not getting a project. And everyone in the room's nodding their head. They agree it's kind of a high volume, smaller project size firm. So a lot of those calls were coming in to start the next project. And even though they said 10%, we cut that in half. What if only 5% of these calls are leading to not getting included on the next opportunity? Again, aim low at the assumptions. Well, that's 3.5 lost opportunities every day. 17 lost opportunities every week. At a $10,000 average project value, which was about ballpark for this firm, and an 11% average net profit on their projects. It's $1,100 in profit, 17 times a week that they were missing out on. It's almost $19,000 in profit every week that they're losing because of the poor client experience with how they handled incoming calls, with connecting clients who needed help with the people who could help them. You take 50 weeks a year, it's $940,000 a year in lost profit because of the experience we provide or don't provide on answering the phones. Now, you're never going to get 70 calls a day going to voicemail down to 0. So there's really not $1 million on the table here. But if you can cut that number in half or even by 25%, that's a substantial available opportunity in additional profit gained because you've done some smart work. So what does this firm do? Well, they invested in some unified communications and some technology to help get calls to project managers, but they also realized We have too many of our project managers busy doing work rather than delegating work to our technical professionals so that the project managers can be more focused on taking care of clients and be responsive to the clients and their needs. So they invested in some technology, they made some hires, they did some training and reorganization, and they really used this insight to change how they delivered to their clients to drive a better outcome. And again, this was just a 200-person firm. So what did we do? Well, we talked about quantifying. We talked about the frequency of something happening. We found several kinds of frequency. We talked about magnitude. There were several things that had a magnitude. The magnitude of lost opportunities. We talked about the magnitude of the average project. We talked about the magnitude of profit. So we had all the component pieces here to then get into the multiply and multiply and multiply. We didn't know how many times people were calling and then not giving us work because we didn't answer the phone. So we made an assumption. Everyone agreed 10%. And we cut that number in half just to make sure it was inarguable. So aim low where you need to. We didn't count the revenue here at 11%. That would have been like $10 million in revenue. We cut that in half, or I cut that down to really only track at the profit. And then looking at the losses, every week, $19,000 in profit lost. So that's driving urgency. The longer we wait, every week we wait, is another $19,000 in profit we're missing out on. So let's go into another example. This is more of a business development example. This last year with the pandemic, everyone was saying, hey, our traditional modes of business development aren't working anymore. We can't go to conferences. We can't go to industry events or town hall meetings. The opportunities for us to bump into potential clients and build the relationship just isn't there. So what are we going to do? Well, some really smart firms have been looking at their existing client base saying, you know what? 70% of our clients say they're raving fans. They say they're really likely to recommend us, but our phone's not ringing off the hook. How do we take these clients that are disposed to recommend us and turn those potential referrals into actual referrals? That's a process we call activating promoters. Let me walk you through an example. We've done about a dozen of these with professional services firms in the last year. And on average, we're working with a business unit. That's about a $10 million business unit. And that business unit might have 100 clients in it, maybe 2 key clients or 2 key contacts per client. So there's about 200 potential people, 200 stakeholders that we work with across this portfolio of $10 million in revenue. And in order to identify who your raving fans are, you need some feedback. So let's say we ask even half of them. It's tough to measure 100%, but let's pick half that we want to get some feedback from, typically aiming for the top half of your revenue. So there's 100 contacts you go out to solicit feedback from. You had a 35% response rate. That's, a little on the low side, but again, aiming low. 67%, that's average for a professional services firm. Let's say 67% are raving fans. They say they would absolutely recommend you. For the leading or progressive firms, it's closer to 80 to 85%. But if you're an average professional services firm, it's 67%. So there's 23 of these 35 respondents who are raving fans. Maybe for whatever reason, we just don't feel comfortable asking for the referral from all 23, but let's go to 75% of them and strike up a referral conversation. And there's a whole technique on how to do that well and not sound salesy, different presentation for a different day. But if you do that and do that well, it's about 18 referral conversations that you can have. Now, what we've seen is on average, these people refer you to about 1.5 net new contacts, whether it's a intra-agency contact, they're going to introduce you to another potential buyer inside their organization, or maybe it's a peer in the industry. It's about 1.5 referrals that you get out of each of these conversations. That means you now have 27 introductions. These introductions are coming from people who know and love you and are raving about you and singing your praises behind your back, which is what you want them to do. So you've got a really high close rate with these referrals. We're seeing, again, industry average is about a 50% close rate on these referrals. So that means you got about 13 new clients that you could pull into the fold from this conversation. Now, we did some quantification up here. It's a $10 million business unit with 100 clients. It tells us the average annual revenue per client is about $100,000. You get 13 net new clients. That's about 1.3 million in annualized revenue from this exercise. Now, I said we don't want to count revenue because revenue itself doesn't have value. We really want to look at the profit. A more holistic way to look at it, a sustainable way to look at it is something called client lifetime value. That's what I like to use. That looks at how much profit do we tend to get? How long does the client tend to stay with us? Because we have multiple years of profit opportunity. And then what is the net present value of all that future profit coming in? So the average professional services firm, say 15% net profit, 85% retention of the work year on year, and a 10% discount rate. Again, there's a whole presentation on our YouTube channel on that. It's about a 64% of annualized revenue is what you'll see in future lifetime profit in net present dollars. So this simple exercise of going out to your raving fans, measuring what their sentiment is, and then activating those who say they're likely to recommend you to generate actual real referrals, and then turn those referrals into captured business is worth about $830,000 in future lifetime profit in net present dollars. That's a pretty compelling outcome here. If you want a shortcut and not do all this math, activating promoters, real world results, we're seeing on average total sales worth about 18% of net service revenue in the 90 to 180 days following this process. Don't stop here, though. You have additional opportunities. I'm going to go into the advanced class here. Those of you who are already done with the math for the day, you can maybe skip this slide. But those who really like to push and think through this, there's some second order and third order value opportunities here. So the question, what's the value in referral potential for each raving fan? Well, we identified there's 23 promoters and they generate $830,000 in referral value. So now we can say that each promoter is worth $36,000 in referral value. So now we start being able to quantify what is the value of having a raving fan in terms of referral dollars. Well, that's useful because that helps us answer the question, what if we could improve or increase our client experience? What if our net promoter score improved from 60 to 75? So what? Well, now we've got some math behind us. If we increased our net promoter score from 60 to 75 in this example, that gives us 4 additional promoters. And if each promoter is worth $36,000 in referral value, they're going to tend to refer us $36,000 in future profit from new client sources. Just going from a net promoter score of 60 to 75 adds another $144,000 in lifetime value. Well, if it takes less than $144,000 to improve your net promoter score from 60 to 75, you got yourself a good investment. Don't stop there. Again, thinking about these third order impacts to the business. These referrals, that's 13 net new clients. Well, on average, 9 of those will be promoters. So each promoter we know is worth $36,000 in future referral value. So not only are we capturing the $800,000 in client lifetime value from the work these new clients give us, but the new promoters that we have will be new referral sources. And that adds another $324,000 in value. So now we're at $830,000 plus 144 plus 324. So we're up to $1.3 million in total value added simply by identifying our promoters, activating on them, and doing some work to increase the likelihood that our clients will be promoters. This is for a $10 million business unit. That's a really big number. A $10 million business unit might generate this much profit in a whole year. And there's just one exercise that could effectively contribute the annual net profit back to the organization. So again, what did we do? We quantified, we looked at frequency, we looked at magnitude, we aimed low with assumptions where we needed to make assumptions. We used industry averages and norms. If we had industry research, we multiplied, we multiplied, we multiplied again. We were counting profit, not revenue. In this example, looking at client lifetime value. What's the net present value of all future profit we expect from that client? Driving some urgency. The sooner we do this, the sooner we take action on this, the more quickly we're able to capture some of this value. And we talked about driving sustainability by looking at those second order and third order impacts to the business. What's the lifetime impact over time? So what I encourage you to do as you start working on your workbook today is think about a self-funding approach to change. There's some CX work that is just foundational. You just got to do some things, and the ROI is really long-term. But there's some CX work you can do, in the next 60, 90 days that's going to create a quick return. So I encourage balancing regular doses of these sugar rush CX ROI big hits with investing in the long term. So if you're going to go out and do something like activating promoters and capture $1.3 million in value, something most firms can do in 90 to 180 days, negotiate with the leaders on your team to say, hey, if we go create that value, can we take a portion of that value and reinvest it in building some more sustainable foundation work for the long term? We can't just go from Snicker bar to Snicker bar. That's not sustainable. It's not healthy. But if we spend too much time building foundations without showing and bringing in measurable return to our business, organizationally, we get tired of it, we forget about it, and we move on to the next big idea. So this alternating cadence between Snicker bars and foundations is what I recommend. And you can really build a self-funding approach. Get your leadership team on board with the first exercise that's measurable, that's going to create results, and pre-negotiate, agree with the team. When we see the results, can we put those results back into the business to start funding our next CX initiative, and then go back and forth. So of course, a big part of this is making sure you measure progress and results. You can't just project what the ROI will be. Once you start the work, you need to put metrics, systems in place that you can start measuring it. Could be as simple as in your CRM, when you bring on a new client, just put a drop down in there that says this is from our activating promoters. So you can run a report later and say, hey, how much opportunity did we create? How much pipeline did we create? How much revenue did we secure where the lead source was an activated promoter? So you probably have these systems in place already. Use them, modify them if needed, so that you can capture and quantify your returns. So I know we covered a lot in 25 minutes. Are you ready to build your business case? We're going to practice here. So we're going to do 2 breakouts today. In breakout 1, you're going to discuss in your breakout group what the opportunity or challenge you see that you want to use CX to go tackle. So in the workbook on page 3, you'll see a list of possible or suggested CX opportunities and CX challenges. By all means, write your own in if you've got something that's top of mind. The idea is here just to get the conversation going. So we're going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll be in breakouts of 4 to 6 people. So you're going to meet a new friend here in just a minute. But in that time, talk a little bit about your business, your challenge, or your opportunity, and just share with your peers what you think that opportunity is. and why you think it's something you want to invest in. So that's going to be breakout 1. We're not going to do the math just yet. We'll all come back together and maybe hear from 1 or 2 groups what they talked about. And from there, we'll go into breakout 2. And breakout 2 is where we're really going to start doing the math. And this is, keep it as simple as you can. What's the frequency of the event? How often does it happen? What's the revenue impact? What's the profit or client lifetime value impact? What's the reduction of or increase of, if you're trying to reduce a problem, if you're trying to increase an opportunity? Let's really think through that. So we have our return. And once we know what our return is, maybe you can estimate the cost of your investment. And the return divided by the investment gives you your return on investment, shown as a percentage. So that's what we're going to do in breakout 2. So don't start that yet. We're going to send you into your breakout rooms now. We'll come back together in about 15 or 20 minutes and talk with your groups about what you see the CX opportunity being that you would like to quantify in part 2. Thanks, and we'll see you all in a few. All right, everyone, welcome back. Making sure we have everyone. Looks like most of us are back here. Well, very good, very good. Hope you guys had some good conversations and made some new friends in that last round. I know a couple of you had rooms where you had some folks jump off, and appreciate you being flexible as you got reallocated in some bigger rooms. So let's I was in a room and Paula from IPS was talking about a client centricity training program that she's trying to get off the ground. Paula, can you just give us a quick overview of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so at IPS, basically what we're trying to do is get everybody in the organization aligned to be client centric. We all come, I was explaining in the other team, from different business worlds, if you will. I myself, for example, was on the client side in the pharma space for 25 plus years of my career, and I started IPS here in Canada about 3.5 years ago. So now I'm consulting. So like me, there's others that come either from the client side, the vendor side. We do have diehard engineering and architects, the designers that have been designing their whole entire career. And we also, well, I guess that really covers bandwidth. And so when you have all these people come into an organization, they come with a culture from the organization that they're with, and they're not necessarily in the service industry, if you will. So early this year, the CEO said that, you know what, our mandate is to be client centric, because if it's not for the clients, we have nothing. We are service providers, and we are here for our clients. And so sure enough, this is very true. And so now we have an initiative to train the whole entire organization. We're trying to do it in 3 tiers. The first one being the fundamentals. Everybody gets that training, from everybody who's currently here to all the new employees on their onboarding. Like they do HSC, they will do the fundamentals of client service, or we haven't really called it anything yet. And second tier is to the sellers and doers, because we don't have a sales organization per se where we have just people go out and sell work. We have the people that, like myself, I do the work, but I also tell my story and it resonates with folks, and they perhaps buy the service. And then we have like the third tier, which is like the account executives that have key accounts and those kinds of guys that or gals that will go, and that's it's about I don't know, do what they do best, right? So basically, we're on this mission to educate the whole entire organization on what it means to be client centric, and this is where we are in our journey. I saw this come up and I thought, hey, I'd like to hear more about what you guys do and so on. So here we are today.
Well, thanks, Paula. I know you're a new member to the community, and thank you for being brave enough to share your story with us. When I've worked with larger organizations like yours in the past that are on a mission to, say, educate 1,500 people, oftentimes what I hear from executives is, boy, we really can't afford to do that. Do you know how much labor and productivity or how many billable hours are going to go into that training?
Mm-hmm.
So is that something you've heard? Is there any pushback that you're getting either from executives or mid-tier leaders, anything like that about the lost productivity?
No, no, this is very important. In fact, the directive came from the CEO himself. This is his, so IPS, I don't know if you guys heard of IPS, but it was started about 31 years ago by two individuals. And basically, from two, we're up to 1,500 and growing about 15% year over year, maybe more in terms of people. And so, it's become, it was an organization where the CEO knew everybody in the organization by name, and he was very proud of that. And, clients are very important. They had a smaller group, meeting with smaller number of clients. As we grow, there's more and more people meeting with clients, and sometimes you miss the mark. Like I say, all it takes is one bad meeting with the client present, and you've just sunk that account, right? Because the project manager is frustrated, or maybe a design engineer says something, or the architect, or somebody on the team just says something that's, really pisses the client off, right? And or is rude or doesn't care. Like, empathy is a big deal, right? When you're a client, you want people to know that they care about your project, right? And so there's a big risk in losing clients. There's a greater opportunity in keeping those clients. And so, it's his directive to say, hey, this is really important to the organization. Here's why. In fact, I'm the leader of that initiative, to be honest.
Well, it's great that you've
And
got
so,
that kind of,
sorry.
it's great that you've got that kind of executive support behind it.
Yeah,
Not
definitely.
all of the
Definitely.
other members of this organization have that kind of executive support behind them.
Yes.
So I wanted
Yes. Yes.
to call out your situation in particular, because that's a common pushback a lot of you will see is it's not the cost to develop the training. It's the cost to deliver the training. You've got 1,500 people at $100 an hour, 80% bill rate times, what, 2, 3, 4 hours of training. You start doing some math and you realize there's a real substantial soft cost investment to roll this training out. So it's important to be equipped as CX leaders to anticipate those kinds of questions or those kinds of pushbacks. What is this training going to cost? Well, if we're taking all of our billable resources off of billable work for 4 hours, that's $400 a resource times 1,000 resources. That's $400,000 in productivity time to train those 1,000 people. So when people or leaders are in that cost mindset, it's because we haven't built an effective value proposition for them. So Paula, as you go into this next phase, I would encourage you to start thinking about, we know we're going to lose, probably $500,000 or so in productivity to go through the training. So what's the business case that supports that investment? Because really, we're not losing productivity. We're gaining some advantage by equipping our people with that training. And we want to be able to demonstrate a clear ROI for that. So audience, that was just something I wanted to talk through with you as another one of the reasons why it's important to really push in on the numbers. So Paula, thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing with us. As we move into this next phase, we're going to push you back out into the same rooms you were just in about 2 minutes. And what we're going to do as we go into this phase is go to the next page of the workbook. It looks kind of like this, those of you who can see my screen. And whatever you were discussing, whether you pick something in the first round or not, here's where you really have to make the decision. What is the CX project or CX effort or CX opportunity or the CX problem I want to try to solve for the purpose of this exercise? And there's on the previous page, there's 3 CX efforts or projects that are on the easier side, really simple math. You need like 3 variables. The next 3 on the list, I've provided equations for you to make it easier. There might be some lightweight, very simple order of operations type math there, but it is a little bit more complex and requires a few more pieces of information or a few more estimates in order to accomplish. What we've done on this worksheet, this long column here that has all of the letters associated with it, These are some of the toolkit items, some of the metrics as you're working on moving CX through the organization. It's just a great list of metrics or numbers you should probably start gathering about your firm. If you don't know what your revenue is, if you don't know how many clients per year or projects per year, if you don't know what your net profit or your client churn is, it's going to be difficult to really do a lot of solid quantification as you're building business cases. Where possible, I've included in parentheses estimates or industry averages. So for example, a client churn, the average professional services firm has an 18% annual client churn. That means this year, 18% of the revenue we had last year isn't there this year. So in order for us to even stay even, we have to replace that with 18% net new revenue or growth in some other area. Your number may be bigger, your number may be smaller. So work with your teams. I'm going to encourage you, come out of this next session or this next breakout with a number written down. What do you think the estimated value or business impact is for the exercise that you've chosen? It's not about being right. It's not about having the most perfect number. It's just about having the conversation and practicing the process so that when you do get some real numbers, you're able to put those to good use. So we're going to go into the breakouts now, and we will be coming back together at about 2:19, 2:20. So we'll see you guys in about 20 minutes. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Sure hope you had some fun quantifying. I'm gonna ask that everyone open up the chat, and if you found a number, if you got to a number, can you just drop it in the chat dialogue over here? I'd love to see collectively what this group of 50 people came up with. I know I was in a room and a larger organization was talking about, boy, if we could do this activating promoters thing with even 25% of our clients, that came up to $37 million in lifetime value that would be captured. So it was a pretty exciting number to see. And I jumped into another room, and there was a exercise going on around writing more empathetic proposals. And all three of the firms working on that kind of decided, well, let's just pick $1 million as a starting point, because then we can do the math no matter what firm we're at. And they found for every $1 million in revenue, if they were better at writing more empathetic proposals, it would generate, $427,000 in new client lifetime value. So a $20 million firm, that's an $8.6 million opportunity. It's a pretty big opportunity. So it's exciting stuff. I see 1.2 million, 280K, 14 million, 241, 8.4, 900,000 over here. That's some good stuff. Mark, I'm excited to see that you're going to take some time to actually pull these numbers out of your financials and do the real calculation. That's exciting to see. 280K over here. Yeah, see, there might be a formula error, Eddie. I apologize about that. I'd love to hear what you were challenged with. Shoot me an email and I'll fix that. I'll work through that with you if I found something. 761 for activating promoters on second tier clients. I also heard one of the client savvy folks in a room sent me a message asking, how do we calculate wasted effort? Where do we get those numbers from if we don't just want to use the 6% industry average? So these are some things to think through. How would you calculate where you're getting wasted effort? Well, any work you're billing towards projects that you have to write off or mark down or strike from the invoice or mark it as unbillable, any of that work that goes uncollected, those are good sources to start looking at to find out where are we doing things, where we're spending the time with the client but we're either saying we can't bill them for it because they didn't ask for it, or the client tells us I'm not going to pay for it. So those could be some good sources to identify that. Excellent. So does anyone want to volunteer to just briefly walk through in 2 or 3 minutes what your opportunity was and what you think you might be able to achieve by tackling that opportunity? I didn't get any volunteers in the 2 rooms I was in. That might just be no one wants to share their personal numbers. And that's all right. Okay. So Rob, you want to do some quick math on this chat log here, and we can celebrate what we accomplished together. I do want to encourage you between now and tomorrow, spend some time thinking through your formula. And if you have any questions or if you got stuck at all, please don't hesitate to email. I have left my calendar free this afternoon and tomorrow specifically to help with any math support questions. So if anyone would like to take this a little bit further, shoot me an email. What's your opportunity? Where did you get stuck? What do you need help with? And I'll be happy to work with you on a one-on-one basis to get you a good answer to your question. You don't need to have the number here in order to finish this workbook, but it absolutely will strengthen this charter by the time you are complete with it. And Blake Godwin over here at Client Savvy is also throwing his email address into the chat. So if you want Blake, you want me, copy us both. One of us will certainly get back to you and help you get a good number on the page. And again, I think Mark's the one who said he was going to spend a couple of weeks working on this. Don't let reality get in the way of making a good estimate. So if you're in doubt, again, aim small, maybe highlight the numbers that you're estimating, go through the process to actually work the formula, even if they're kind of fake numbers, because what a lot of times you'll find is you'll go do a bunch of research to find the numbers, you'll finally plug them into the formula and you realize, oh, there's one more number that I need. And boy, it would have been a whole lot easier if I'd known that when I was doing my research. So actually work the formula with some close enough numbers, even if they're completely imaginary, just to really understand the mechanism that you're going through, so that when you do go into the books or you do reach out to a finance or accounting for some help on the numbers, or marketing, if it's a proposal, win rates, whatever it is, when you do start going out to get the real numbers, you're not having to go back for a second dose and say, oh, hey, I forgot to ask you for this number as well. So that can be a useful tool for you. And Rob's saying here, we're at $37 million. That's not a bad 90 minutes, guys. Congratulations. I think there are 80 of us here, so that's about $500,000 each that we found. Exciting. Good work. So getting ready for tomorrow, Andrea Mack will be joining us and leading us tomorrow. Andrea's with Prequel. She's been a member of the CXps community for several years. She does a lot of work in legal and recently has been helping a woman-owned and a woman-serving businesses really find ways to grow. So she's got some really cool stuff to bring us through on finding the stories that are going to help win hearts and not just the numbers that are going to win the minds. So let's show up for that. Start thinking about some of the cool or compelling stories. You'll see on the next page of the workbook, there's some prompts. What kind of stories might you want to start thinking about? We're going to practice those. I tell them in 2 minutes tomorrow, and then we're going to work through the story architecture or the story elements to understand how are we going to put these stories to use to help drive our client experience initiative forward. So also, I do again want to say thank you to all of our sponsors. We very much appreciate you being here. And I want to call everyone again, call everyone's attention to our regional meetups. Our first one is in just a few weeks in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've, I think, only got 12 seats left in that because we are a little more capacity constrained. So please don't hesitate. Make sure you jump in on that as quickly as you can so that you can have a spot. We're going to be in Columbus, Ohio in July, and then in Atlanta in August. So if those are near to you, start thinking about that, getting those on your calendar. Most of these are limited to about 30 people just for social distancing reasons. So look forward to seeing all of you. I think that's it for announcements. And I think that means we have a couple of minutes back into your day. So I will stick around until everyone leaves. If you have any questions or you want to grab me for some Q&A before we get going, I'll be here and I look forward to answering your questions. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.